Well, thank you everyone for coming to our virtual version of the fall membership meeting. And today we're going to go over a fairly quick list of things to do. I would like to say welcome all of you for being successful so far, at least this semester at Oakland. And I would just remind you at the beginning, and I will do this at the end, if you're having any questions or concerns or problems, you are always free to contact either me or Amy, and we will try to resolve any problems that you might have, or at least provide you with answers to questions. That said, we're gonna go through our agenda for today. We're gonna be first talking about nominations. Allison Bone, who is our current vice president, has to step down. And so we have to have an election to replace her. And we'll begin by talking about that. Also, our treasurer, Joy Jiang, is going to be giving us a treasurer's report. And then we'll talk some about just the sort of general climate that we have on campus, latest news, that sort of thing, after those two presentations. So if we could begin with the nominations committee, I want to begin by thanking Katie Greer, David Scharf, and Tara Gardner have been serving as the nominations committee. The way that we handle executive committee elections is that we form a nominations committee and they go out and find folks who are willing to run. And so I am sorry, unfortunately, because there are so many of us, you're on three screens.
Katie's here.
Katie's here?
I'm here, yep.
Katie, can you please take over the presentation of the situation, the candidates?
Absolutely. Thanks, Karen. So on behalf of the nominations committee, I would like to announce that we have two great candidates for vice president that you will see on the ballot upcoming. Those are Caitlin Dembski and Wendy Johnson. I don't know if either of them are here today, but thank you both for agreeing to run. Also on the ballot is just the renewal of our grievance officer, Jennifer Thor. So it will be a vote to renew her tenure as grievance officer for another 2 years. The other thing I do need to do is ask if there are any nominations for the VP position from the floor. Okay, barring none, there will be just those two names on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you to the whole committee. It's one of those things where you have to call up lots of people, and sometimes a lot of people say, no, thank you, not right now. And so it is sometimes a frustrating job, but we always seem to find good candidates. And so I am happy for that. And I think I know both of these members and they're both really good, and they will do, either one of them will do well. And I've worked with Jen now for quite a while, and Jen is an extraordinarily good grievance officer. So the next thing we will do is look at the treasurer's update. So Joy, if you can please take over.
Unmute.
Am I good now? Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So first of all, I want to just say that the information for this treasurer's report is not based on the final financial reports provided by our accountant. Our accountant actually failed to provide us with the financial statements. Because of that, we probably will be looking for a new accountant. So the numbers that I'm going to show you today, I plugged it out of our tax return and bank statement and so on and so forth. So it might not be accurate to the last dollar, but it's not going to be too far off the mark either. So first of all, we collected 430,000 dues and submitted about 140,000 of that to our national AAUP. And then we also received 20,000 grant from the national AAUP's Legal Aid Foundation for our lawsuits and stuff like that. We did have invest income of about $36,000. So our total revenue is a little under $350,000. This is our total expenses. I'm going to go by each category first and then come back. So first on the list is staff expenses. So that includes salary for our amazing executive director, and then also a one-time bonus because of the bargaining year. A lot of hours extra hours Amy had to put into it. We also are paying a monthly $160 for Scott's healthcare because he chose a lower retirement contribution to get this healthcare contribution instead. So we're paying $1,900-ish a year for Scott's healthcare plan after he retired. And then add employee benefits, healthcare and all that, and then payroll taxes. So our total staff expense is $125,000 and change. Office expenses, software, supplies, and all that, $14,000. We did have a much higher legal expenses because of the bargaining last year. So we have a legal expense of $169,000-ish. Plus we have to pay insurance and then accounting, tax preparation, website administration, and payroll service. So this year we have 188,000 plus in professional services. Now this amount is definitely going to be much lower this year because we're not bargaining this year, right? So we also incur other bargaining expenses, including like we have to pay for the bargaining teams for all their really hard work, and then we also donated $10,000 to faculty emergency fund that we set up, I think, during the COVID. So total other expenses is like about $58,000. So if we add all these expenses, our total expense ended up $386,000 and change, which left us with a deficit of $38,547 in deficit. So overall, we had this deficit in 2021, but that is mainly because of the extra costs we incurred during the bargaining. So 2022, we most likely will end up with no deficit. Now, we're not going to have probably positive investment income either because this year stock market has been going crazy, but we will most likely not going to have any deficit in 2022. So overall, our association is quite healthy financially. We've built up substantial assets because we've been very careful with using our resources. We are going to become part of the AFT. With that, we will see a minor increase in our annual outgoing dues starting next year, 2023. But we also will save about $10,000 because we now don't have to carry our own liability insurance anymore as a result of this affiliation with AFT. So given all that, we feel our current dues formula is adequate to support our current as well as any anticipated expenditures we may have for 2023. Keep in mind our dues percentage has remained unchanged for actually more than 25 years, 28 years now, I think. It is still among one of the lowest in Michigan. So overall, I feel we are really healthy financially, and then we'll be able to support whatever activities we have to carry out in the years to come. So that's all. Any questions?
What are our ongoing expenses for the lawyer on each year without a bargaining?
It's less than half of that, Janelle. And we
So-
didn't it wasn't just bargaining. We also had a very expensive arbitration in 2021. So between the arbitration and bargaining, we're not even on track to spend half of that in 2022.
I think 2022 so far we are under 60,000, I think.
So we're $60,000 to $80,000 a year for the attorney.
Depend on
Well-
like whether we actually have to have like, like we did this ULP thing, which will cost us money. And then if we have a lot of grievance cases, we have to consult our attorney, then we will incur extra cost. So some years, if we have a very quiet year, then not a lot. But last year is because the faculty chose to have the attorney present during the negotiation, during the matter. I think that's why we ended up having a much higher legal expenses.
Sarah, you had a question?
Yeah, I was curious, among the faculty, do we have a number of how many of them are non-dues paying? Or however you officially want to say that in the,
Are you asking how many bargaining unit faculty members are not dues paying?
that is the question.
Okay.
I know
It
of
is-
one.
We have
obviously.
around it. The number is usually hovering. I have to check because I don't get the official roster until, well, today is when it's due. But it's around 85% of our bargaining unit faculty are part of dues paying members. And the vast majority of non-dues paying members are part-time faculty, because it's a lot tougher to convince part-time faculty that the union is serving them in the same way that it's serving.
With the exception of one that I know about, right?
Oh, There's plenty of part-time faculty member who are dues paying members. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying percentage wise, the number of full-time faculty who are not full dues paying members is very small.
What is the number?
So we're not losing, my real reason for asking was to, we're not losing a significant income that, in other words, maybe we could be getting. Or no, it's not the breaking point.
I can't give you, Sumi just asked, and it answers your question too, Sarah. Again, I don't get the official roster of our faculty until I get the 16A report on October 20th today. So I can't do the official numbers of how many we actually have as active members and what faculty aren't, because I don't have the actual faculty list yet. So I'll be able to calculate that. And then the executive committee works on reaching out to faculty who are not full dues paying members to see sort of if we can help with that and sort of encourage that. So I won't have those numbers, but I can share them after I get the document from Oakland and do that work.
If you could add that to a future agenda, I'd appreciate that.
I'll send it out in an email.
Okay.
And I would add, comparatively to the other public unionized universities, we have good full-time participation. We're moderately unusual in that we have everybody in the same bargaining unit. And our full-time faculty, they participate at very high levels compared to the other universities. And we are very grateful for that. we try very hard to make sure that you think you're getting your money's worth. And so we appreciate your support. Are there any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Joy. We are getting a new accountant.
I called today. And
Yeah.
actually, I'll let you know, the accountant told me again this morning that he was working on the reports today, but I've literally heard that since the beginning of June. So, but I did call another accountant today. So working on it.
We're working on it. A couple informational items for all of you. One is fairly new. It actually wasn't part of our original agenda, but it came to my attention at the beginning of this week that there have been at least 2 cases where administrators have told members of the union that it's okay, the AAUP has already authorized this. And in the 2 cases that were brought to my attention, one, nobody had ever asked our opinion about it, so it was hard for us to authorize. And in the other case, it was, we had actually said the opposite of what we were being purported to favor. I am in the process of figuring out what is at the base of this, why there has been this miscommunication. I will be doing my very best to get to the root of it and get it resolved. But I would caution all of you, if you have an administrator tells you with great confidence, oh, the AAUP has already approved of this, and you have doubts, please feel free to contact either me or Amy, and we can actually tell you with some certainty as to whether or not, because we actually do sometimes, every now and then an administrator will call us up and say, hey, is this okay? And we often say, yes, that doesn't really violate the contract, that's all right. And sometimes we say, no, paragraph, whatever it is going to create a problem, so no, you can't. But this is, I'm a little concerned that there has been a fairly tight window. It might just be circumstantial. Every now and then this happens. It was just very unusual for me that twice on Tuesday, I had 2 completely unconnected queries. Just have that in your head, because I know we all deal with administrators now and then. And so have that in your head, in the back of your mind, and feel free to say, I can't give you an answer right now, but, and then, get a hold of us and we'll tell you. And certainly if there's ever a question that you have, not based on something that an administrator has, but if you're ever wondering, does the contract cover this? Is this protected by the contract? Is this limited by the contract? Is this, completely ignored by the contract? Amy will be more than happy to field that question. I can field that question. Amy can usually tell you the answer right away. Usually I can, about 70% of the time I can tell you the answer right away. But I always then find out what the answer is. So then we move from there. So, word of caution. As you may know, we had an unfair labor practice. We filed an unfair labor charge at the beginning of last winter term. It was, excuse me, my lights go off because motion detector. It's great for the planet, but we filed a ULP charge because there was information that the administration is legally required to provide us, which we asked for and was not provided. And so we filed a ULP charge. It was revolving around the question of healthcare benefits and healthcare charges. And since that is such an important part of our compensation, we were upset when we discovered that they actually had the information and failed to pass it on to us. They counter filed a ULP against us for having a work stoppage last fall. And so that process was going through the court system. We had been assigned an administrative judge. The administrative judge was going through the briefs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the administrative judge approached both parties and strongly encouraged us to mediate a resolution. And it has been our experience in labor politics and labor law that when a judge asks you to first try mediation, you always say, of course we will, because you don't want the judge who might ultimately be determining the result of the case to be upset with you because the judge asked you to mediate and you did not. So we mediated. In fact, it was a fairly, I shouldn't even say fairly. We were happy with the outcome that resulted from that mediation. The agreement was both sides are dropping their ULPs, so we no longer have a ULP against the university, nor do they have one against us. And we have a written commitment that is part of the mediation settlement that from now on, every year, the AAUP will be part of the email chain as we receive information about healthcare. So we will find out what the healthcare rates are pretty much the same time that the university does. We don't have to wait for them to send it to us. We will be copied. So we will know when they're asking, we will know when they receive, that this will give us far quicker information. We're getting it every year. So it will be hopefully become part of the habit of the HR department that they will provide that information to us. And we believe that that will significantly help us during bargaining. That this is an agreement that can be supported by the legal system. So if Oakland fails to provide us with this information, we have far stronger legal recourse than we did previously. And so we are actually in a better position now in terms of our relationship to information than we had been before the settlement. So understand that we will be watching for this information to come to us from now on. We'll get one practice year before we go into bargaining. So that will be helpful. And then we will take it from there. That's the state of that ULP.
Hey, Karen, can I ask a quick question following up?
Of course.
Yeah, so had we opted not to mediate and had the judge ruled in our favor, what would have been a likely consequence for OU? Would they have paid a fine or just had to give us the information? I'm just
No, Oakland would not have had to pay any fines. Our redress was, and we were not asking for all that much. We were asking for an admission of guilt.
And that they not do it again.
And that they never do it again. So we did not get the admission of guilt, but we think probably in a fairly defensible way, get the half of, and they'll never do it again.
And we got reporting every year, which is not something we've been privy to.
Yeah. And I
Thank you
will,
very much.
yeah. And I will say that will be beneficial, I think, in the future. If I can jump ahead to healthcare costs this year, our healthcare across the nation, certainly across Michigan, went up. This has a lot to do with COVID and the long-term impact of COVID on healthcare systems and the way that they're structured and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, we expected an unusually high rise in rates. For those of you who are on priority, that rise was significant, but it was sort of at the high end of what some of us were assuming it would be. that the one that really stood out and was brought to our attention, it was about 3 weeks ago, 2.5, 3 weeks ago, was the Blue Care Network, in particular the PPO. And to their credit, because I can almost never say that, that's not true. But anyway, to their credit, HR gave us a heads up and they said, the Blue Care Network is really going to go up. And we wanted you to know that before the numbers went out for open enrollment. We were horrified by the Blue Care Network changes, and particularly for the PPO. And we know that there are a number of members who really rely on access to that PPO, and that this was going to become a real financial burden for some people. We immediately contacted folks in the American Federation of Teachers, that because they have a much larger permanent staff than we do. And they actually have a labor-oriented insurance broker who works on their behalf, they're a consultant. This person's office is a consultant, but if any member has a question about insurance rates and that sort of thing, she is happy to step in on behalf of the AFT and look at the situation. So it was 2 days after we found the numbers. I had a meeting with folks from the AFT, including Suzanne. We immediately decided we needed to have a meeting with Blue Care representatives. AFT stepped in on our behalf. They have fairly strong relations that we did not have previously with Blue Care. We got a meeting with the two actuaries that came up with the Oakland plan. In addition, the two primary labor people at Blue Care, as well as Oakland's insurance broker was also in that meeting, and then several of us representing Oakland and from the labor perspective. We discovered in that meeting the amount of information that Blue Care Network was not aware of when they came up with the proposal for Oakland. We believed was woefully inadequate. They simply didn't understand a lot of the way that we handle healthcare at the university. And they thought that their rates were going to be highly competitive with Priority, and we had to disabuse them of that notion. They did go back. They said, let us have another meeting privately, and we will discuss if we can actually come up with different rates for Oakland. About a week later, they came back and said that they were not able to do that, that in fact they would still be continuing with the rates that had been originally offered. And that was a big disappointment. I will say, had we known these numbers back in August and had been able, the problem was actually Oakland had already printed all of the information for open enrollment, that we were already really close to when open enrollment was beginning. And I think that had we had more time, we might have at least been able to bring that down a little bit. But it depends a lot on, do you have the HMO or do you have the PPO? Are you a single person or do you have family? There's a big kind of variation in those plans. But across the board, you're going to be paying more next year if you're, everybody, but you're going to be paying much more if you're with Blue Cross. We have already explained things to them, and we think that they will approach kind of coming to Oakland with a plan next year differently than they did this year. We are at least hoping for that. Open enrollment begins on the 17th. And it goes through, Amy, help me. I don't want to give the wrong.
I just
time.
put it on there, midnight on the 28th.
Okay. So if you don't want to change, you don't have to do anything. You
That's
just,
not necessarily true.
well, that's true. For the healthcare, it's if you are in the programs where you are maintaining a retainer for a lawyer in the medical
HSA.
thank you, HSA, those you have to re-up every year. But if you're on priority now, you will be on priority next year unless you change it.
So I have an email go out to everyone after this meeting, just as a reminder, but for those of you who are looking for your benefits guide, it's in your eSpace. So last week or something, at some point, Oakland sent out an email with instructions on where to go, but that's where you find that normal thing that used to be a physical document is no longer a physical document. It's in your eSpace.
So, and Stefan, you had a question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. As I remember, the Affordable Care Act set a cap on annual increases in premiums of like 15% or something. Does this increase fall within the cap, or?
My
That's
understanding,
very specific to individual plans. It's completely different.
yeah,
Well,
this is legal. What they are doing is legal.
Those caps don't apply to large employers.
and we're considered a large employer because we have above
Anything
50.
over 50 is
Okay.
considered a large employer.
Okay.
Joni?
Hey, I was curious about the sort of the enhanced benefits qualification structures in now both the BCN and the Priority Health one. I dug pretty deeply into the Priority Health one to see if I could save the $330 a month that my family's insurance is going to be going up. And I was perhaps shouldn't have been surprised, but was surprised by the sort of intrusiveness of the Priority Health model. I'm inured to the BCN one, but the Priority Health one struck me as sort of especially egregious, that they were naming half a dozen different specific lab values that you needed to be under in order to access the advantageous rates. And I'm not in health sciences or health equity or anything like that, but I know that a lot of those metrics are not necessarily equally applicable to different groups. It seems to me that there are potentially real equity issues in telling someone what their waist size needs to be based on their gender, or what their BMI should be, given sort of differences in how useful that metric is for different folks of different races, right? And I'm sure that this is something that you have thought about and looked into quite extensively, but like, I'd be interested in whether there was an equity basis either now or in the future for challenging the university to move away from those plans. Presumably they're not illegal, otherwise they wouldn't have them. But I just kind of wanted to name that as something that sucks, and it would be great if we could lean on the university to do better about.
You go ahead, Amy.
Okay, well, what the university would say, speaking for them, just because I've heard them enough, there's this whole other metric now in priority, so that if the sort of what they called them the traditional, if you can't meet the traditional guidelines, now there's this whole relatively insane system of points that you can amass by doing things like tracking your steps every day, or going and getting your mammogram, or going in and getting, and there is this, I forget what it's called. Anybody dug into it? It's a whole separate system, so that
Healthy
the idea
choices?
being, pardon me?
No.
Is it healthy
Something
choices?
different. I don't know.
No.
It's something run by Virgin Analytics or something.
Yeah, it's Virgin Analytics is
Yeah.
running.
And so the idea, Joni, is that is supposed to exist as a counterpoint to the fact that these other metrics might not be attainable by everybody in the same way. So they're offering all these other ridiculous metrics by which you can get 5 extra points or 10 extra points, or and to make it easier for everyone to get that better coverage.
As a matter of fact, the AFT is looking into whether or not this can be legally challenged as an issue of privacy. But also, I mean, this is really we've known about the difference between healthy choice versus regular for a fairly long time, and we've been opposing them because they are kind of arbitrary, and they're just, they're problematic for a variety of reasons. But also, there's particularly a question of what happens when this moves to an external group. And so I know that there are folks at the AFT who are now sort of beginning, but the announcement that Priority was doing this kind of alternative to their Healthy Choices version is something that we just found out about and immediately.
And I believe we told them it was stupid.
And we did tell them it was stupid. We told them, and several people, not just we, Amy and I, but people from the CT union, people from the APs have all expressed their extraordinary opposition to this on a variety of fronts. We will continue that push. Unfortunately, Oakland is responsible for contracting the insurance. And so when they agree to something, it makes us stuck with it. But we believe that they are not being proper stewards of our interests by accepting these kinds of things. But there's not a lot we can do at the moment except to figure out a strategy for removing them in the future. Stefan?
Yeah, I had one issue about privacy that I think I emailed Amy about. I got a statement regarding research purposes for our health data related to the Blue Cross stuff. And it said that the researchers had to establish an IRB protocol saying that the data would be private, or that they could take data in aggregate. And I'm concerned that taking data in aggregate now includes data about the number of abortion services provided to our employees. And maybe we can get a agreement from the university that at least that data won't be shared with researchers. Concerned about the statement as to the language, as to its privacy, its anonymous nature.
Mm-hmm. No, we're working on that. But yeah, I mean, and it's not, I mean, I think you give a very good example for something that we don't even want that aggregate data floating around. But there are a lot of other things that, mental health care. I'm not sure that we want a lot of aggregate data about depression circulating. And so I think it's kind of problematic.
Probably a good time to
And
talk.
that's a very polite way of putting it.
Maybe a good time to introduce the committee then.
Yes, the executive committee has been upset about these healthcare issues. And we have decided that a better strategy for this year is beginning in January of 23, we're going to create a committee of the executive committee. You don't have to be on the executive committee, but we're going to create this committee that will investigate the climate of healthcare in the state, what might be available to us that we might not be availing ourselves of. What are the differences between the various plans that other higher ed? So we will be trying to identify similar institutions with similar populations, and certainly that includes universities. It might include universities these things are still, we're in the process of drafting the charge for this committee. It will be a relatively small group, 3 to 5 people. We already have some volunteers, but particularly if you have experience in healthcare or have a professional understanding of this, but even if you don't, if you just say, this is really important to me and I really want to learn this stuff, and participate, please send your name and contact info, which is your email, to Amy. And we're going to try to have the charge finished for this group in over the Christmas break in early January, so that they can actually begin their work in January. They will have a year in which to be gathering information and coming up with suggestions, or at least sort of general kind of conclusions on the basis of this analysis. And then that information will be given to the bargaining team as part of a bargaining strategy. I will say that healthcare is a mandatory subject of bargaining. And it seems like one way that we might be able to leverage change is at the table. But if we do that, we have to come well armed. And we are certainly working with other organizations to try to flesh out that information and flesh out that strategy. And that will be continuing all next year. So if you're interested in this, please contact either me or Amy.
I just want to tweak your timeline a little bit. The charge, I think our goal is to have that ready in the next couple of weeks, and we will email that out to all the members so that folks know if this is a committee that they want to be part of. Because I think it's really important, because this isn't, we expect this to be, kind of time consuming. There's a lot of sort of dirty work that needs to be done here, because it's really difficult to compare and contrast health insurance benefits at different universities, because they're all structured so differently. So hopefully, and when that charge is ready, when the executive committee has it sort of tweaked, we'll send that out to the membership as a whole, and solicit volunteers then as well.
Mm-hmm. So but put that in your head to think about. So hopefully we will come to the table in 24 with a much better way of protecting our members during negotiations and under the contract. So, because we were in this, our interactions with the university and with Blue Cross this year were particularly disheartening. In terms of this issue of stewardship, is Oakland trying to protect us? I was saddened, angered. There are all kinds of words, plug them in, that cover my experience in this whole experience. So, any other questions?
Todd, what do you mean? Who should you contact about priority health benefits? Just questions?
Yeah, because I can never remember.
So George Lever is technically in charge of benefits right now, but honestly, I would call, I think Corey Brittingham
Okay.
is the most responsive, in my opinion. And his email, I'm pretty sure, is just Britting at.
No, I can.
Okay, that's who I would contact.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Janelle, Bobby Shostak's term ends in 2024, right? And so that means he will be here through the next round of negotiations. I mean, hypothetically,
Or at least
the beginning of it, we could get a new person. His term will end August
15, I think.
15th.
It's either 15 or 20,
I think the BOTs are like the 12th or 13th. It's right in there.
but it's mid-August is when their terms shift.
Bobby is on the board until August 11th, 2024.
Thank you.
August 11th. There you go. Thank you.
And yeah, those are 8-year terms. He has been renewed as chair for this year, but that's they redetermine that every year. Right now, we're short board members.
Well, we're technically not, because they have continued their appointments.
Hull has not.
Oh, are you sure? I
Hull
don't
has
think that. Okay.
but there are technically 2 vacancies. 2 people had expired terms last August. We have 2 people who have been put forward by various labor organizations. As of yet, the governor's office has not filled those openings. So we're short.
I just want to read it, that Stoliker is still a member of the board. Oakland was allowed to continue her term. Okay. Until the governor decides to make the appointment.
So we're hoping that happens in January. So that's in the air. Yeah, but Stoliker has continued to be on the board. Yes, Janelle.
I was just wondering what else is being done. It sounds like we're planning well for the next round of negotiations, which I suspect are going to be pretty tough. And I think the university is positioning itself relative to that for some reason. I mean, some of the things that are sort of being talked about. What else can we be doing, or are there plans in place to maybe get some of the committees set up in advance, as you're doing with the healthcare committee? Maybe some of the other committees, like the communication committee, I think was very important to have a communication plan in place up front of, and maybe different contingency models. And, there's some folks who have, experience with some of the social media channels and things like that, and having, just messaging based on different contingencies that's already planned and kind of ready to go. I think that would help a lot.
Yeah, we're just not,
Throw that out there.
we're not going to pull the trigger on those things yet. We can't really have a communications team until we have a bargaining team. And so there will be, some of that stuff will be put in place as we get to the end of this academic year.
So in the March 2023 election, we will be electing our next bargaining slate, negotiating slate, because we elect them early in 2023 so that we can send them to the Summer Institute for the AAUP over the summer, before they start bargaining and getting together, basically probably the end of 2024, or sorry, end of 2023, beginning of 2024. So once we have the chief negotiator in place and that team in place, then we can sort of do the next steps from there on those pieces.
Yeah, Karen?
Okay, is it okay to bring up something new? Okay, great. So I'm pretty upset about this, so I'm going to try to maintain. So this is regarding the PSLF deadline paperwork for those who are trying to apply for student loan forgiveness, and the forms that we have to get approved by HR for the hours that part-time faculty work. So for those of us who are technically considered part-time faculty, this is a pretty big issue. And if any of you are here, this is something that you probably want to, I don't know. Anyway, so when we go to get our forms verified for our hours with HR, that's with Terry Dean, and I think there's someone else we can do that with. They calculate our hours. We have to be considered full-time in order to qualify for that loan forgiveness. But the way that they're calculating the hours is a huge problem, and they're not doing really anything to change that. It's an individual basis. I don't know why the university didn't prepare for that. I don't know why HR is not preparing for that. It's personally not a problem for me. My hours got figured and it was more than full-time, which is interesting, so I am a part-time employee. Other colleagues, that is not an issue. That's not happening. Some of my colleagues, 16 hours. My husband, it was 25 hours, which doesn't make sense. He works more than me. He's worked here longer than I have. We figured out why. They are calculating it 2.25 hours, which, okay, I'll start working 2.25 hours per credit, if that's what they would like me to do. And they're dividing it by 12 months, which we work 8 months, most of us do. PSLF also requires only 8 months. So this is a problem. They're not counting any of our committee work or any of the extra work that we do. That is also part of our pay. They also don't have any records before 2016. So this is not an accurate representation of our time here. So if you were here before 2016, you're not getting the accurate hours. That might be it.
Wait, well, Karen, so is it 2.25 or 2.5 out of curiosity?
It's 2.25.
Okay, so I literally just sent an email to Joy Cunningham, Eric Herpich, and Terry Dean this morning about this. So I've been in contact with Dave Dobby, who's sort of second in command of AFT Michigan, because other universities do calculate this better than we do for our adjunct faculty. And so I asked them to reconsider. I asked them to have a meeting with us about this. I included, there's a government from the Department of Education that talks about ways in which universities can modify their classifications in order to make it easier for adjuncts to qualify. So I just sent out that email today. And I included Karen on that. So hopefully we will hear something back.
I understand that. I don't understand why it's this hard. Why do we have to fight so hard for things that we shouldn't have to fight this hard for? We only have until the 31st to get that paperwork in. Going in there, I mean, I was there, I think last week. I dropped my paper off. I had to wait several days for them to even do the calculations. I didn't even have a problem. Other people are having to wait. I know that this is not your guys' fault. I'm fired up because I'm so angry at everything that they're trying to make us do. And this is huge for so many people. They could get their student loans wiped out. And we can't, because they're saying some people work 16 hours.
Hey, Karen. So I was talking to Karen earlier about because I had a meeting with George Lever and Terry from HR earlier today, and they're the ones who broke down how they're figuring out our hours. And I just wanted to add that Karen did a really great job summarizing the stuff I had communicated to her. But the other thing I wanted to add is they also don't count any administrative work we've done. So anything that we've done administratively or committees we were on that we were paid for, they're not giving us any hours for those either. So the work we're doing over 8 months is then being spread out over 12 months, which makes us look like we're doing a lot less hours. They're only averaging since 2016. So if we worked more hours the years before that, it doesn't count. And then we don't get any credit for any administrative or committee work we've done.
So I should loop George into this conversation is part of what you're saying there. I will include him today. And I reiterate that this is, I mean, they obviously know this is time sensitive, but.
Can I just add, I've been obviously doing this for a while, and a long time back, I was a lecturer and I looked into the program and they told me volunteer hours do count, administrative hours do count. What they advise that I do, the PSLF people, not the university, is to get a letter from my department, have it put on my file in human resources that I volunteered so many hours with this committee or that committee, and then your employer should then be able to take that into account, that the government is not requiring it be paid hours, that they told me volunteer hours also counted as long as it was with the same employer towards the total, towards the weekly total. And they lost my employment contracts as well. So it's a good thing that my department kept photocopies of all of my signed contracts, because then they put them back into my employment file too. So for that, you may want to check with your department and see if they have photocopies of your signed contracts, or if you do, that may help.
Well, I do. I mean, I want to look into the employment record issue, because there's actually a paragraph of the contract that talks about where employment records should be. And if the university literally doesn't have any employment records preceding 2016 for our special lectures, that seems wildly problematic.
This is the first time I have heard that. And I agree.
My assumption is that they have them, but they're not in that office. I don't want to speak for Tina, but my impression is that they can figure this stuff differently, but it would be a lot of paperwork.
Well, and I mean, all of the decisions they're making are optional. Universities can choose to make these decisions. So they can choose that 2.25 calculation at Wayne State. I know they're using ×3. At Eastern, they're using what the Department of Education suggests using is 2.5, because that matches what you use for student loans. So
necessarily that they don't have.
Who's speaking? Back to you, Karen. I mean,
Okay.
I'm going to work on it.
Yeah.
And make some phone calls.
Thank you for bringing this to our attention. we will do what we can. Okay. We're moving forward. Actually, we have a Senate meeting that begins at 3:10. So I want to go to that. And I know some other senators are here. So we're going to try to finish up the rest of the agenda.
You can skip the what's next. I'm emailing it to everyone anyways.
Okay. We are, the affiliation with the AFT is moving on. We have already been working actually fairly extensively with David Hecker, who's the head of the Michigan State AFT. He's been extraordinarily helpful. I will say there has been, as Joy mentioned in the treasurer's report, we no longer have to pay liability insurance. As a nonprofit corporation, we had to pay liability insurance. We are now covered by the AFTs, and that saves us about $10,000 a year, which is good. That also, there used to be an active Michigan State conference of the AAUP. That conference went moribund for a variety of rather complicated reasons, but it was never dissolved. We are now in the process of dissolving the Michigan Conference. And what will happen as a result of that is that the bank accounts of the Michigan Conference will be dispersed back to the members of the conference. And Oakland, as a member of the conference, will be getting around $30,000 as a result of that. We will be recreating the Michigan Conference, but it's going to look very different than it used to. It will be a little bit more informal. We won't have to have a big budget. We won't have that many office expenses, that sort of thing. But the plan is that the representatives from the various universities will meet together and talk about common problems and talk about how to approach those. We know that the university administrations coordinate very definitively over issues of faculty compensation, over issues of contract negotiation, that sort of thing. And so we want to improve our coordination among the unions so that we can better deal with that sort of larger entity that we're trying to deal with. Also, I will point out, I am on the National Committee for the integration of the AAUP and the AFT. We will certainly consider to be an independent organization, but what we want to do is look at the strengths of both organizations and figure out how we can best unify those strengths. And so we had our first meeting last weekend. One thing that became incredibly clear was the common cause that AFT and AAUP representatives had in terms of improving higher ed and public higher ed in particular, but higher ed in general. And we're very positive about how, as a combined entity, as an affiliated union of the AFT, we can become a much more effective agent on behalf of improvement of higher ed. And so our next meeting will be in January, and I hope to have even more positive news after that one. Also, I will point out that the University Senate is considering changes to the Senate Constitution. We encourage, even those of you who are not senators, we encourage you to be aware of what's going on there, and understand that it's important to understand how we can improve the Senate and understand the process. And so we would ask you to, if you're not a senator, talk to your senators, people who know who are senators, to find out what's going on. We actually have here 2 members of the executive committee, Ken and Aaron, and I'm sure that they would be happy to help explain things to you.
And Ken
Um,
also just
you-
put the link for the Senate meeting in the chat for those of you who, because it starts in a few minutes.
Mhm. And I will say that also the one area where there was a concern, the current Senate Constitution specifies that amendments have to be, votes have to be done through the mail. The AAUP takes the position that that is mail. That was the intent of the people when they wrote that in. That, however, that does not mean that we are opposed to the idea of amendment. There are some amendments that we question. But there are some dramatic changes that are out there as potentialities. For example, the Honors College and the graduate schools would be considered to be organized faculties. And that's a pretty big change. Deans would become ex officio members. And so, I mean, there are issues that will change the Senate, and we want to make sure that our members are aware of these changes and can express opinions if they have them. And at least so you aren't blindsided by any changes that occur in that major institution of governance on campus. So Janelle.
Thanks. I just wanted to say, it sounds like this is a potentially pretty big set of changes coming, and it might be helpful if we had, I don't know, a little more insight, I guess, from, shake that light on, Karen, come on.
Well,
but there, I mean, it sounds like, hey, there's changes coming, but it sounds pretty big, maybe.
Well, the Senate Constitution that we operate under now was written in the early 1980s. Oakland has changed since the early 1980s. The way that we do higher ed has changed since the early 1980s. There's lots of changes that are not addressed in the current document. Right now, the steering committee has been examining potential changes. So it is my understanding that these are not coming to the floor today, but that they will be eventually. Stuff is going to come to the floor. And I just don't want people saying, holy moly, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? Well,
and people need to be going to Senate.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you are not an elected member, you cannot vote, but you can go. And we strongly encourage you. And as in all democracies, it's nice to know what's going on.
Before you wrap up, Karen, do you want to ask really quickly if anyone else has new business? Because I know you need to.
Yes, exactly. Is there any new business? If there is new business that either would take you 4 hours to explain, or that you don't think of right now, but then suddenly, oh, wait a minute, I meant to ask this. Please feel free to email Amy or me, and we will do our very best to try to address the problem or the question or the concern or the whatever. We will do our best to try to resolve problems. We can't always, but we can always try. So, which is what we do commit to. We will try. So, any other questions or concerns? Actually, I will be stepping out because I am a strange old woman and I like to attend in person the Senate, which is why I'm in my office right now. So all I have to do is walk across 100 feet. I thank you all for coming today. I hope you know more now than you did when you came onto this call. And once again, if there's ever any questions or problems that you have, please let us know as soon as you can, and we will do what we can to try to resolve that. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you to everybody on the board for all you do.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.